top story at 7:30, the ANC is proposing open contestation for leadership positions. This proposal will be coupled with an electoral commission that will vet people nominated for positions ahead of its elections. Now, the move is aimed at ridding the electoral system of gatekeeping and manipulation. The proposal will be debated at the governing party's policy conference, and it will only come into effect if it is adopted at the December conference. However, this proposal seems like a departure from the ANC tradition of discouraging lobbying, but supporters of the proposal say this will end factionalism, which prevails when leadership campaigns are run behind closed doors.
To create an open forum for discussion and for engagement, so that you will not have, one of the challenges with the lobbying is where no one is supposed to declare that they are standing as candidates, but then you got lobbyists who will move around and undermine the power of the branch leadership or the branch members who should be able to openly declare their views. Part of the issues that have also arisen here have to do with the fact that in some of the areas there were complaints. I think if you looked at the nomination of councillors, candidate councillors, there would have been a lot of challenges where people have raised various disputes. And so to remove any local interest out of it, it might probably be helpful to have people from outside who have a specific interest in the integrity of the process. Such a committee would then preside and then take things as they are and make sure that they move up to the national leadership level without any kind of interference. The issue is not so much about subverting the views of the branch, it's about making sure that they are not compromised.
And here's what the ANC proposes to do to review nomination and electoral processes to allow for open contestation, a revolutionary electoral commission to vet people nominated for leadership, and an open contestation to be guided by transparency to eradicate gatekeeping. And joining us, Botsang Muilwa and Tsepo Khadima, political analyst. The lines are always open on 011-542-2186. Are these, good evening to you, Botsang. Are these desperate measures of trying to get rid of obsolete or archaic methods of leadership progression, or is this a sign of the ANC moving with the times?
Well, good evening to your viewers. Cindy, every organization in the world reaches a stage in life whereby you have to adhere to the current dynamics of politics or whatever you are involved in. And the ANC actually should have long done this process of eliminating the old traditional, style of doing their conference and elections, because it has not been working for them. We know that policy-wise and on paper, they've been discouraging all this naming before the date has been announced and people, having slates and all that. However, practically on the ground, the policy position did not work. The ANC Women's League, at the moment, actually, they've made their position very clear that they are nominating and they are standing behind Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma against the policy position of the party. But I think it is well within the right of any evolving and developing organization. However, I don't know if it will solve the problems of factionalism in the organization. It may worsen it, actually, because as soon as people know well in advance who will be contesting for which position, there will be briberies happening, there'll be conniving, there'll be people, switching floors from one group or one slate to another. So it may work either way. But the most important thing also that they have mentioned is to say they want to vet the people who are going to be standing for position, which I think is a very good point in the right directions, so that they must have elected leaders who have been cleared of any wrongdoing, criminal activities, or even bad intentions. But the question becomes, who will be conducting the vetting? Exactly. Who will be conducting the vetting? As Botsang was saying, that it opens itself up to an opportunity to coerce, influence, lobby, mobilize, etc., based on whichever campaign candidate is more popular.
Look, my view is that I studied the document that were released yesterday, and as framed, particularly on this issue, as it is currently framed, it will only entrench the divisions and the factionalism that is unfortunately growing within the African National Congress. Let me put it this way, I would like to tell the Catholic Church a lot of things, more so on how they should appoint a bishop or the bishop of the Catholic Church. But I'm not a member. So I accept that, I don't even have to waste time and tell them. Now, what the ANC is creating now, they want people who are not members of the ANC, who have shown no interest at all to wanting to be part of the ANC, to now have a say in who leads the African National Congress. That for me is going to unfortunately be more disastrous than the process we saw in Tshwane last year with the local government elections, whereby that they had wanted members of the public who were not members of the African National Congress in good or regular standing, having to have a say as who can be a mayoral candidate. That certainly is going to, I think, is going to bring this party to its knees if they do not correct it. The documents as currently they are phrased, I think they need a lot more work to be done. For example, they are placing too much importance on the position of president, but actually there is no definition of the functions, duties, power and authority of that position. They still talk about democratic centralism, collective leadership, and yet you're saying this position of president is so important when effectively the ANC president position is more of a figurehead more than anybody with any element of power and authority. And yet the South African public or the citizens, they expect that position to at least be carrying some sort of a defined role, power, authority, duties and functions. And they've not included that. So one wonders as to come the policy conference in June, end of June, will they now delve a lot more into this? The other thing that I found it to be very upset is that they are talking about reducing the National Executive Committee size, but undefined number, but there's no motivation as to why. The motivation that they are trying to advance there, that you want the NEC to be more in touch with the public or the citizens, because they should lead not just the ANC, but lead the country as a whole. I'm saying with the reduced number, 57 million people and growing, I just cannot see how a smaller NEC can be more effective as they are claiming. So I think these are very difficult times for the ANC.
Yeah, but don't you think it's an idea that wasn't thought through, perhaps in in NEC discussions that should have gone to the general points within the meeting itself, as opposed to making it on the priority list?
Cindy, I browsed through some of those policy documents, and what I found lacking, I want to agree with Tsepo, is they are giving what they intend to do, especially regarding reducing the number of the NEC. The role of the president is actually demonstrated as a ceremonial role. It doesn't talk of the functions and the duties of the president of the ANC. I think it was a harshly pressed decision. I think the African National Congress is frustrated, is going through very hard times. They're trying to bring changes that will excite the nation. But the mistake they are doing is you don't just make changes for the sake that you want to bring change, while you are even damaging your reputation. For example, where they mention the reduction of the NEC from 86 to, actually they mentioned probably 60, there's the assumption that is being talked about, yeah, which was the initial number prior to Polokwane 2007. They don't give reasons. Why are they reducing it? The main reason that Tsepo has alluded to say in order to be able to reach people more, it doesn't make mathematical sense to me, because if the population of South Africa by 2007 was sitting at about 48 million, now we are sitting at 57 million. Now you are reducing the number of people who are supposed to be in touch with the population. It doesn't make sense. If the ANC wants to grow and to have people on the field, on the ground, why would they reduce the number? But also, when you look at the question of wanting to change the electoral process, they don't give the reasons what went wrong except factionalism. What went wrong with the electoral process they have been following. And Tsepo is correct. If they are going to be vetted, they can't vet themselves. They will have to call some of us who are outsiders, who will actually influence and or determine who leads the ANC.
Perhaps this is the part you can play in advising. I mean, how would you advise the ANC on going forward in terms of its leadership, not only appointments, but the whole contestation process? Because as it stands, no sooner was the date announced for the elective conference and then all the names were popping up in terms of interested parties. So how would you advise the ANC in light of Unity in Action, the year of OR Tambo, and the document on Through the Eye of the Needle, etc.? How would you advise them in going forward with the electoral process?
Well, the Electoral Commission, I think itself needs to be given some element of power, and more so powers to disqualify those that do not observe the rules, or those whose whatever faction that will be supporting them if they do not observe the rules of clean campaigning and ensuring that at the end of the day they stick to the ethos, the ideology of the African National Congress. So that Electoral Commission that they are suggesting there, again, by not defining its powers, and more so, as I say, powers to be able to disqualify the errant candidates. So that for me is something that they need to pay attention to, maybe to remedy it. And perhaps maybe a good lesson here in this case might be that of the United States, because if they are saying, well, we need to have people come forth and make themselves available or declare that indeed they are available for leadership, and not just only for the position of president or the top 6, but in terms of the NEC as a whole, then maybe they need to engage in that process whereby there's that debate, so that the candidates can show how best they understand the party that they will now be leading. And maybe that would help. But what puzzles me is that also, ideologically, I would say that the African National Congress is more at home with the Communist Party of China. And there's a lot that you can learn in how the Communist Party of China actually develops and grooms future leaders. That in fact, when the time for leadership change comes, nobody is surprised. That process is not something that is done overnight. It's not something that you do 6 months before the elective conference. It's something that is done years in advance. And maybe I would have thought that if that was contained in this set of documents that they released yesterday, one would have been saying, well, at least there is a clear plan. What I'm seeing at the moment is that there's a lot of things that it would appear that not much thought has been given to that. And that speaks to what? It speaks to the fact that the engagement of the people, when they go to a plenary or they go to a policy conference, the question becomes, well, who actually sits in those plenaries to come up with this or ratify these policies? Again, there's not much, except to say one needs to be a delegate who was nominated by their own branch. But again, that delegate, when they come into conference, what value are they bringing into conference, be it policy conference or elective conference, to be able to cast these policies into the constitution or cast them in stone? There's too many gaps that one can only hope that for the sake of the African National Congress, if it still hopes to be the governing party come 2019, that they will fill those gaps before the policy conference in June.
Yeah, but won't this alienate the branches as well, who are influential in putting the preferred candidates' names forward, so that now, if everybody's got their own independent campaign on the fringes, that it takes away from the traditional way of doing things?
It definitely does, Cindy. I actually don't know how many of the ANC members at grassroots level has gone through these policy documents. It actually alienates the branches and the powers that were vested into the branches to determine who's going to the national leadership. You know how the NEC is elected. It's not like the top 6 that have been nominated by the branches, and they come directly from the branches to regions, to sub-regions, and so forth. But another important element, same mistake done by many African countries. Boom, we are in the same situation. We're doing the same mistake. The ANC has failed to groom and develop future leaders, especially among their youngsters, young leaders. I'm talking about people who are under 15 and down. They are there. They've got capable, cadres and candidates, but they fail to prepare to say, come the time Jacob Zuma goes, who will be the automatic succession or the preferred succession to can lead us. The other element also where they are actually failing is I don't think they are preparing to govern beyond 2019. I had thought at the beginning of this year, after the failures or the challenges the ANC experienced in August local elections, I thought they will primarily focus on uniting the organization. From the top 6 downwards, the organization seems to be breaking down into pieces on all fronts every day. With their Communist Alliance, with their COSATU Alliance, they are talking in different tongues. Everybody's pulling in a different direction. it doesn't show any chances of them uniting towards 2019, not towards the elective conference.
Yeah. But I mean, one would argue 105-year, very rich liberal movement that is largely credited and lauded for the sacrifices of bringing us where we are, that it's not a history that we can just wipe out. We know even with the local elections that at least at a provincial or national level, the numbers still came out that 11 million South Africans voted for the African National Congress. So, you know, what people may say and vent in the public domain doesn't necessarily translate into the votes as it's been proven. So there is possibly one, I don't know what the ANC can still do to ensure that you speak of the succession, the credible, pragmatic leaders that will lead the organization.
Reduction of
scandal, corruption, etc.
All of these things, all these things that are happening, they are negatively impacting on the ruling party at the moment. And this is very crucial. South Africans in the past, they voted, as you correctly said, historically. They voted for the liberation movement. They voted for Mandela at some stage. They voted for this party that they know, the green, gold, and black flag. That's what people knew. But those dynamics are changing. We cannot sit here, Cindy, and say the ANC has 11 million voters when they had 11 million on along. However, the population of the country has increased with almost 10 million, you know, in the last 20 years. You know? So there is no corresponding percentage of voters that is growing according to the demographics and the number of the citizens of the country. That should be worrying. If 11 million voted for me from 1994 to 2014, 11 million, but the numbers of the population of the country is increasing, I should be worried that actually my voters are not increasing, they are being diminished.
Okay, so you're saying better the processes that have always been applied, stick to the tradition, this might just backfire on the party.
Look, I think this will backfire, but I just want some reflection. You say, well, what advice would one give to the ANC? I've said this before in this very same studio, and I want to repeat it again, because it's very valuable. The example we learned from the LA Dodgers, which is a baseball team out of the United States, in its more than 100 years of history as a baseball team. Before you see a player wearing the LA Dodgers jersey, you are assured that that player would have gone through 3 years of training on what this club that they are about to play for, what it stands for. It prepares the player for life on the field and beyond the field. Now, the ANC since 1996 have spoken about the importance of political education. Even in the current documents, they are raising that as a nice to have, that it doesn't mean that people who join the ANC means they are ready to govern, ready to lead, and yet there is no deliberate, it's not being made mandatory that anybody who occupies any position of leadership from the branch all the way to the National Executive Committee should have gone through a quality assurance test through the political education where they write an examination with a minimum pass rate so that therefore you avoid most of the problems that they are currently being faced with. And lastly, I would say this. If I was sitting in council with the ANC leadership, I would say, if you think that, look, you're not going to go with the Communist Party of China's model of leadership grooming and development, there are two authors out of the United States, Professor Noel M. Tichy and Professor Rom Sharon. They wrote two books, one called The Leadership Engine and the other one called The Leadership Pipeline. The lessons contained in those two books are invaluable. Hence, you have got the majority of the Fortune 500 companies globally coming out of the United States because they are incorporating the leadership development and grooming ethos and techniques that are contained by what those two authors have really shared with the world. And I would say that maybe that's something that they can take some lessons from there to say, how do you groom, how do you develop a next generation of leaders, because everything rises and falls on leadership, and the citizens are quite within their right to demand that show us your leadership or the quality thereof.
All right, but sorry, Botsang, do you think the merit, the attempts being made in dealing with issues of gatekeeping and ensuring that the caliber of leadership within the ANC are given an opportunity to thrive, to lead, and restore the dignity and I suppose, a sense of pride in the organization, are afforded the opportunity to do so? And if not, does the current system not only perpetuate a perpetuation of corruption and factionalism? You don't think that the new process may just sift out the rotten apples, as it were?
Cindy, when I started speaking, I said it may backfire. And where I'm sitting, honestly speaking, unfortunately, I agree with Sepo. I don't think they will bear positive fruits out of what has been proposed at the moment. I don't think they have done enough. They could have done far better than what has happened now. After Polokwane, I think one of the most or the biggest conferences of the ANC, elective conference, was the 2007, the Polokwane one, but which was very straightforward and clear. It was along the lines of President Thabo Mbeki and Jacob Zuma. It was very clear. After 2007, the ANC should have implemented a process of developing and grooming cadres that will take over the years, as Sepo has alluded to, through training, through them knowing. I've noticed one thing about members of the ANC, and it's also in these policy documents that came out. They do not even interpret the policies of the organization in the same term. They don't. Let me make an example. The president has announced on January 8th statement, as well as during SONA and in some public statements about expropriation of land without compensation. In the very same policy that was released yesterday, it is talking totally the opposite of that. Now you ask yourself, the policy developers of the ANC, the people who are sitting in either conferences or seminars developing these policies, are they talking the same language with the head of the organization? They do not. I looked at the document, especially the land part. It is actually going back to the same old rule that talks about buying the land, and I'm saying to myself, are these people talking the same language? Are they at par? Are they in the same wavelength? It doesn't look like. It is not only about training them in leadership qualities and skills. It is making sure that members and potential leaders of your organization, they know, they understand the policies of your organization. I always say the manifesto, the policies of the organization, especially the political party, it's like a Bible to the Christians. It's like a Quran to the Muslims. You must know the ins and outs. You must be able to sell it to whoever you want to recruit to be a Christian, with the Bible closed, without you not having the Bible. Yeah. But I don't see that. I don't think any ANC member will sit today and convince me based on policy to say these are the policies that will lead the country properly. Come and join us on the basis of these policies. They can translate them.
All right, so you don't think this intervention will deal with the so-called enemy within the party and leave it with the servitude leaders that, that are there understanding what the policies and constitution of the ANC is?
Well, I mean, one has to consider that we are having this discussion here this evening. There are many members of the African National Congress at home who are watching this, and they're going to be in their branches having discussions or considering this policy discussion documents that were released. And it remains to be seen as to, in the next 3 months, leading to the policy conference, how then the ordinary members of the ANC start to respond and start to really see how they recraft, if so needed, this policy discussion documents, but more how to give more substance, as I say that most of the things that are there, really, they need more. There is more substance that is required. And let's maybe take it that this is to initiate a process of a discussion, a process of interrogation, and come June, end of June, when they go into policy conference, let's see what then they emerge with. Will there be substance so that come December, but other things, they can do them now. They don't have to wait for the elective conference for the new leadership. They can do those things now. Issues of land, as Bozang is saying, they don't need a policy conference. They don't need elective conference. They can do that today. They're in power today. They're in government. They're in parliament. They have got the overwhelming majority in parliament. So socio-economic transformation, they talk about the lack thereof. They can fix that today. They don't need to wait for December.
All right, so to all the other ANC members, supporters, and general society listening in, thanks indeed for joining us, our esteemed panelists.